Hi, this is Oren with Natalie and Sharvin Keshavarznia, concluding our 3-part podcast series on flipping houses called Flipping Down the House. Today we will be discussing the last 3 parts of the procedure involved in flipping. So let's just go over briefly a reminder of what we were talking about previously in the last 2 episodes. So you search for a house, location, you got to have the right price, it's got to be the right size and the style of the house for flipping. Houses that are too big might be problematic, so you don't really go into that, right? Mm-hmm. You're very careful what you go with. You go to location, you see what the information sheet says, and then, if you want to proceed, you do a quick inspection on the home. You check windows, furnace, electrical, layout, foundation, etc. You visualize what the house can be. So this is assuming that now you want to go with the house and you're really strongly considering it. So you visualize potential, you create a timeline assuming that in the event you do buy it. You write your renovation budget, your carrying costs and closing costs, and this includes contingency budget, can be flexible. If all numbers make sense, you put in the offer. Now you have to also put in conditions, which includes financing, inspection, and house insurance, because every house that has a lien on it or a mortgage has to have insurance. And anything else you feel is necessary, each one has more specific conditions or less specific, right? Depends on the house. So now we've got to the next part, which is you got the house and you start demolition. So you've put in your price, you've gotten the financing for it, the bank approves. How do you go about starting the demolition process?
We finalize our plan, what we want to do, and once we've all kind of agreed, we've done the proper inspections, specialized inspections, maybe an engineer, maybe a highly trained plumber to figure out what challenges we need to go through. And once everything is worked out, then we line up the dumpsters, and the easy part,
knocking down walls.
Yeah, opening up the house is an easier time. It's
fun.
It's
you just take a sledgehammer.
Take a sledgehammer.
Yeah, pretty much.
Open up. The guys actually don't mind doing it. It's sort of fun. It's a fun day. We usually order pizza.
Pizza and sledgehammers.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so the demolition involves you bringing in a crew to do this. Now, how do you go about finding the crew, or do you already have one for after years of doing this?
Yes, we have a team of guys we work with, depending on what exactly we need done that day. Demo, pretty much everyone likes to participate in. Like I said, it's a fun day. It's the start of the project. Everybody was anxious to see exactly what
space we have to work with.
Yeah,
once walls are out, and toilets and tubs and ceilings, depending on the plan.
The walls come down. That really kind of starts to give a bit of visual of what the concept is that we came up with.
So how much do you actually tear down? I mean, do you find that often you have to tear a lot down because of how you visualize the house, or do you find a lot of the things you keep the same, just a few things you take away? I mean, obviously you can't take away every wall, right? But I mean, what do you find in your experience?
Really plays back to the plan, really. You don't want to take down a wall unless you really need to. Certain walls carry what they call a load, a barrier load, which are very important to the structure of the building. So if you're going to remove any walls that are load bearing, then engineers need to come in and clear that process. But yeah, the demo, although it sounds like you're ripping apart, there is a kind of a process to it, and you definitely don't want to demo anything that you don't want to.
And sometimes we keep part of the house. It just depends. Each house is different.
So it can be very constrained on what you're taking out, and then it could be more flexible. But you did say that if there's some things, because of the way the layout is, you have to bring in engineers to take a look at it first and determine. Okay.
Yes, it's all about specialized inspections at the beginning process. Like, it's okay to have the vision, and but it all needs to be verified by the certain specialist to do it correct, anyways.
Okay. Do you find that sometimes the visual plan comes in first, meaning that you already know what walls you're going to take down? Have you ever found that maybe in the middle of doing the demolition that there are issues with the way you visualize the house in the first place, things you didn't account for?
Yeah.
Yes, many times. So, I mean, even with doing all the, bringing in the engineers, the specialized inspections to verify certain things, no one can really tell what's exactly behind the wall until the wall is opened up. Many times we'll have a vision, there's thoughts, many experts will weigh in on what is going to be proposed behind the wall. Once they come down, we can see the exact construction and either verify what we thought, or in some cases, it is a surprise.
Have you ever had to put a wall back up? Has that happened before?
Not necessarily walls being put back up. We definitely, if we see that there's an issue, maybe that wasn't exactly planned out, we'll put a temporary brace in or a temporary wall to bring the proper people back in to make sure to verify what the next step is.
But sometimes the design does change.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, when you visualize the house and you do come up with the design for flipping, do you keep always sort of a flexible plan?
And budget, yes.
Well, budget, yeah. We discussed last time the budget has to be flexible.
The plan
Yes.
is, it's flexible. A little bit.
You have to roll with the punches in a way, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you can't be too flexible, because you have parameters or budgets, constraints we want to stick to, but at the end of the day, you have to be flexible. But the more flexible you are,
The more money
the
it's
more
going to
money
cost.
it can cost usually.
I see. Okay. We'll move on to the next part, which is the weekly schedule and what is going to happen with the rental design. So let me ask you, before that we get too much into it, how long does an average home, say bungalows, because that's what you specialize in, how long does that take you to do top to bottom renovation on average? Do you both find?
4 months, depending.
For-
3 to 4 months, depending on the situation.
For a substantial flip, 3 to 4 months. We have done them in 30 days, but to do them correctly, to open them back up, to really start from scratch on say plumbing and electrical, you really need the time to properly do it. There's a process to it. Inspections, there's permits that need to be pulled. There's different experts weigh in differently, and sometimes things need to be revisited. So there's not really not meant to be a quick process to do it correct. So 4 months is our goal. Anyway.
That's a good timeline.
It's a
Is to have
goal.
4 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course, larger homes take longer, so that could be up to 6 months. But for what you do, 4 months is what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go about making a weekly schedule? I mean, can you walk me through each month what you expect to get done? According to budget and the visualization of the home.
Well, we touched a little bit about demo, and demo is really just opening up the house and really seeing where, confirming the challenges. There's kind of a process to putting it back together. Certain things go before certain things. Before the walls go on, obviously we want to make sure it's insulated properly. We want to make sure the electrical is done properly. If there's any plumbing or any framing modifications that need to happen. All inspections that need to happen prior to closing back up.
So what do you mean by closing back up?
Closing up the wall, essentially. So when the house is opened up, meaning the walls have been taken off, and all you see is the bare structure, the rough structure they call it. So rough framing, rough plumbing, rough electrical. You see the ins and outs of the inner workings of the home, and you're only able to see it when the walls are taken down. So that's when a lot of the majority of the inspections will happen, and that's really, you want to get all your rough.
So the inspection, meaning the person comes in, you discuss with them the plan, and they will tell you if this is feasible or not.
Yeah, like when you apply for a permit, you submit a plan, and the city reviews it, and there's certain specialized inspectors review it as well.
Okay.
For example, in HVAC, heating and ventilation, there needs to be a plan outlining on how exactly where the furnace is going to be, where the vents are going to go, and that type of thing. So
Okay.
when that's submitted with your building plan, the certain inspectors review certain parts,
And then sign off on it. When
Sign
it's
off.
done correctly.
sign off on the correct design,
Right.
and then once the design is signed off on, then you need to implement that design.
And that means you have to bring in. Do you have to bring in engineers at all to look at these things, or this is just something you've done when you planned the house?
Certain aspects need engineer confirmations, load-bearing walls, beams, certain types of structures. If they're going to be multi-stories, you need to bring on further experts to basically acknowledge that what you're going to build is within limits of structural code.
I see. So at this point, you've been cleared. You have to bring in the engineers, and then who else do you bring in to do the actual work? So do you bring in is there somebody you know since you've been in the business for a while, that like an electrician who comes in and does all the work first underneath all the...
Yes, of course. So we get the permit back from the city, and it'll outline all the areas that are in the design. Just to use, for examples, use an example, one flip in particular, if we are going to be doing new electrical, new plumbing, and new heating and air conditioning, we would submit a permit outlining those changes. We would have any confirmations done by any specialized, either a master electrician or an engineer. And once everything is cleared, then we bring in the trades. Once I have a plan that is cleared, we bring in the trades at that point.
Okay. So do you ever find you have to make a lot of adjustments, or is it mostly you've done this long enough that you know exactly what's...
It's actually all about adjustments. This game is really all about the adjustments. There's more than one way to flip a house. There's more than one way to wire a house, more than one way to plumb a house. So the building codes that are set forth, the mandates that are set forth, you're able to build within those codes. And that's why you bring in the specialized trades, the electricians, the plumbers. They come in and they look at the plan, and they create a way to complete the plan within code.
Now, you talked about also insulation. That goes before the electrical, or that goes after?
Insulation usually is done at the end after rough ends, before the close up. All depending on... Insulation is something that you wouldn't want to have the insulation in while you're trying to wire that wall.
So let's break down over the 4 months which part takes how long. So how long do you expect, for example, the demo to take within the 4-month period?
The demo could take anywhere from a couple days to 2 weeks.
It's usually a week.
A week, so a week on average. And then the next part, which is the inspection process and getting city approval for your design. How long does that take?
The city usually recommends 2 weeks to do the review for drawings and plans.
Okay,
yeah.
so a month for the initial process to ensure that the way you want to go forth with your plan is acceptable.
They'll usually, all the plans and the permits and drawings will be worked out before we start demoing.
Okay, so that comes even before that. So,
yeah.
So within the first month, you'll have all that stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
What is the next step? So you've completed those two. What's the next thing you do typically?
Well, we have our permits. We do the demo,
and then we look at the space and decide whether the design is going to work that way, or if we change it.
During that process, there could be some rechanging, but at that point we have a plan, and we're usually we're going with it. Start the demo, then we start to put the house back together according to the plan. So electrical, rough plumbing, insulation. We have framing that goes on. Then we have a bunch of inspections to verify all the work that's happened, and once we get the okay to move forward from that point, then we start to close up. We start to put walls on, some of the finishing stuff, the trims, the doors, the windows.
Put new windows in pretty much every time, or is that something that you only do if it's really in need?
It all depends if it's called for. I mean, if they're new windows, we generally wouldn't replace them, but if they need to be replaced, then yeah.
Like, for example, if the seals are broken, or if it doesn't fit the design of the house, that's, I'm assuming, mainly why you would change them?
Yes, I mean, windows have a lifespan, and they've made, the newer the windows, the more insulation value they carry. Yes, I mean, generally speaking, if the windows are old, or if they call what's called failing windows, meaning that the seal has been broken, then they usually need to be replaced.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I feel like I'm doing all the talking.
It's okay, I follow you right now.
My wife
this is your job.
You're the smart one here, honey. I think
we all know that, but this is what you do.
Okay.
I just pick out the colors.
Ooh. Shots fired. Okay, so so you're the one who's kind of the visionary of the home, right? That's a lot of what you play into here. So how do you help Sharvin make a schedule? Because he has the tradespeople and the crew come in and renovate the house. So how do you help? How does that work?
Well, I just come in when we have to, when paint starts happening, flooring, tile, kitchen cabinets, things like that, carpet, I usually just post to each wall what color of paint's going on. And they pick up the flooring, but I've already gone and purchased it. So all of the material is ready and waiting, and I label it with a black marker what room and where it's going.
At what point in this process, I mean, maybe if I'm mistaken, I don't know, remember if you mentioned it earlier, but what point do you decide all of these things? Is this before even the demolition, or is this...
Some of the stuff is decided before demolition, and some is decided once the rooms are all cleared and demoed.
She really keeps pace. I mean, when we're ready for the material, it's usually purchased and ready to go. She's also very good with putting out fires. Sometimes, the plan might be to go with a 36-inch bathroom vanity, but certain things have happened and we don't have that clearance anymore. Natalie's really good with taking back that old vanity and getting a new vanity very quickly, so it doesn't
having a plan B.
Hold up production. Exactly, plan B.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're basically like Sharvin said, you keep pace with everything, and then, I mean, you're right on schedule, and you already have everything arranged for the most part before and after the demo.
Right.
So you try to keep up. But how do you come up with a weekly schedule? So give me an example, just off the top of your head, like, month 2. What would be, like, say, weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, if you don't mind.
All the rough construction needs to be either completed or all the challenges worked out, and have a good hold on all the rough. So meaning within the first month we would like to start buttoning up walls. The rough stuff can go fairly quick. It's the fine carpentry that can really hold people up with the specialized finishings. The shiny metallics, the hard surfaces, the finishes, the trims. These things are generally expensive, tough to install, so they're the ones that take the bulk of the time.
I see. Okay. And that's the rough construction is the first thing you want to get done.
Yeah.
In the second month. How long does that take approximately in your experience?
The scope of the job really is the main factor, but if on average, if we're going to say a 4-month project, so by month 1 we want to have on the way to buttoning up the walls, to take into consideration, to give a bit of maybe an example of what I'm trying to explain. Say if we were to do the rough plumbing in a shower. The rough plumbing in a shower may take a day, maybe 2, but to install that shower, tile that shower, put all the finishings in, could take maybe a month. So depending on the complexity of the shower, but so it's something that it could take a couple days to do the rough. It could take almost a month to finish. You can see if you use that kind of philosophy throughout the house. The first part is just
so the bare essentials can take no time, but finishing everything else, like
it's very time consuming.
So like the finishing, the aesthetic touches almost in the shower, and it seems to me that when in that example are what take a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
A lot longer, and also the cost.
I see.
The rough in is generally not as expensive as the tub, the tiles, the faucets, all the finishings that you'd see in a normal shower.
Okay, so now that you've discussed the rough construction, you said the second step was putting in the aesthetics, right? And so a lot of this plays into what you do because you want to make sure the house looks exactly the way you visualized it, right? So how do you go about finding
materials?
Yes, materials, and where do you draw your inspiration from for the interior?
Draw my inspiration from? I don't know. Just what's trending, magazines, the internet.
We travel. We walk into places. Walk into a store. You open up a magazine,
and I just
You're always
like the concept of whatever I see. And then I just shop at different stores like Rona, Home Depot, Home Sense, all over the place, really, wherever I can find deals. Like, I have a budget, so It just depends where I find.
I see. So you just shop like price shop like crazy to find the nicest thing for the best price.
Exactly.
Giving you bigger profit margins.
Natalie has formed a sort of reputation with our vendors.
Yeah.
They when she comes in,
they all hide. No, they laugh.
No, it's not she just does her job very well and always is after the best price.
Well, she does her due diligence, right? I mean, you can't just spend whatever you want, right? And you can't have the fanciest and it has to be a reasonable price and it still look good, right?
And a good product.
The goal. Yeah, exactly, and a good product. So, can you give me an example of something specific where you saw something in a magazine or you in your travels, like for example to Europe, and then when you were flipping a house, you saw this would look nice in here. Can you think of one?
So we did an apartment downtown. We did one of our spaces, and when we were traveling, I saw them position tile a specific way to make the room look larger. So we did that because we had a pretty small bathroom. So I guess that's one idea that I...
Is that the St. Paul space?
Yes. 146 St. Paul. I think it's 146 St. Paul.
Is it 142, 144?
Yes,
yeah, 142, 144.
That's what it is.
Little things like that can really help your product stand out when you're finished flipping, because a lot of the houses around here tend to look the same, but then because you have that travel experience, it's a bonus when you bring those things back here.
I believe this plays so much to your strength, Natalie. Like, even you infuse this with your real estate stuff that you do. I mean, changing a light in a room would totally change the feel of the room. And it's something so small, nobody would think about it. But she does this all the time with her listings, where she'll go in and just change 4 or 5 lights in the house and throw some pillows, some accents, and right away the house has a different feel. Even the owners, if they come home, they've been gone for 2 hours, and these small changes happen, they're just blown away.
And they're like, maybe I don't want to sell my house anymore. I think I want to stay.
And this is something that you want to make sure goes into every house that you flip, which is just a little list of details. And that's one of your strengths when you visualize the house, is paying attention to detail.
Yes. Also when I list a house, like Sharvin said.
Well, we can also discuss that when it comes to that part.
Natalie does pop on site quite often, and she has definitely an authoritative character there on site, and all the guys have deemed her the Raptor as her nickname.
Yeah, they go do the sound
when
I come on site.
So we'll be in an attic or something, and I'll hear "Kaka," which means Natalie has
entered the building. So loving.
And be at attention. But
make that your doorbell. You ring the doorbell to the house to come here. The Raptor sound.
And then they all say, "Uh-oh, she's here."
The guys, including me, we all have great respect for everyone who works on the project.
Yeah.
Well, it's better that than someone who everybody loves all the time and but doesn't ever pay attention to detail, right? I mean, there's I'd rather that almost if especially for you, since you also have to sell the house, right?
Yeah.
Than someone who
No, they just like to bug me.
It works really well, and when it all comes together after the long haul, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah, they even bring their wives and girlfriends through to see the end product. They're so proud.
She's watching you, man. So,
Kaka, kaka.
Oh man.
How do you schedule putting all of the material that she gets from the vendors into the house? So how long does this part take? Where now you've stripped it down, you put the insulation in, the electrical, the plumbing, the basic plumbing, and everything. How long does the aesthetic take? I mean, you said it takes most of the time. How long did that take in 4 months?
2 months. Half the time is dedicated to finishing up and making it look the final product.
Pretty.
It's a great question you answered, because one of the toughest issues is the coordination of everything. Having everything show up on day one would just make things even more challenging. Having an active construction site, lots of different people in on a daily basis, you can have 10, 20 people in that cycling through the house doing various jobs. So the more flooring or the more appliances that are hanging around could potentially be damaged, or can all contribute to either having a successful flip or not. So having everything timed properly when things need to be there at certain times is a very key component to the whole flip schedule and keeping everybody on pace. Just to give an example with that, say flooring, for instance. Most wood floorings, if it's real flooring, they need to be climatized. So the flooring needs to be sitting in the area where it's going to be installed for at least 48 hours. So if the flooring shows up that day and the floor installers show up that day, even though we have everything there, they still can't do the install because it hasn't been properly climatized yet. Every aspect of the flip has these small components too that need to be kind of planned out, and it's a lot of different things that need to be organized.
And again, like you said, it's important to be flexible because these things can go awry or they can go wrong, and you have to be able to adjust very quickly. And I'm guessing in your experience, because you've done it a few times, you've learned to adjust very well to these things.
Mm-hmm. Can I give you a great example?
Yeah.
Last flip, we had a flooring issue.
Oh, right.
All the flooring was there. All the flooring was climatized. The floor showed up. Within an hour, it had been determined that the flooring wasn't a superior enough product. It was chipping, it was breaking, and we decided right there and then that the flooring that we'd put down was coming up. The floors were going to have to be rescheduled. We called our vendor right away. They'd sent a truck. They came, picked up the old flooring, and we, by the afternoon, had new flooring being delivered to the site. So we had a pretty catastrophic situation where that would have bumped us back. It was in the closing, I think, the last 2 weeks of the flip. It needed to go in. We're at the mercy of everyone else's schedules, the delivery schedules, the installer schedules. But quick thinking, good teams, the flooring installers we've been using for many flips, the vendors we had also been using for many flips, everyone stepped up, and within 24 hours we had new flooring. The installers were there, and it didn't cause too much of an issue.
No.
Immediately following the realization that this floor wasn't going to be good enough to install, you already called the vendor and they filled your order that quickly?
Yes, we sent photos of what was happening. We do enough business with them that it wasn't any questions.
It was a trust thing.
It was a trust.
And I already
right
had a plan B of what we could choose from. So I just went to the vendor, said yes, this is what we want, ordered it, and it was at the house the next day.
Mm-hmm. And it ended up being one of the showcases of the house, of the home.
Yeah,
the flooring
beautiful.
that we used was the showstopper. It was a new type of flooring that just hit the market. They call it a Type 4. It's the hardest floor that we've ever seen in terms of being able to scuff or scratch, and it was the showcase. That small little decision where it disappointed a lot of people and caused a little bit of stress that one day, but ended up being the right decision.
I see. I just wanted to know on your end what sort of things that you pay attention to, since we talked about when you come to the house, you want to make sure everything's right. What are things that you look at, that you're vigilant about when you're looking at it while it's being constantly worked on?
I just make sure that the paint colors that I've chosen are going in the correct rooms, light fixtures are going in the correct rooms, tile looks good that's being installed, floor looks good that's being installed. Just the tidiness of the painting.
And
I just look
change them sometimes too.
Yeah, sometimes I change my paint colors.
If it goes on the wall and she doesn't like it, she's called it a couple times.
Yeah.
I see. And is this a frequent issue, or is this just something just rarely happens? Or
Rarely happens.
I think it's happened maybe twice.
That I didn't like the color.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So over this 4-month process, I think, what would you say is the most difficult thing that you have to deal with? I mean, in everything.
Me or you? The most difficult thing.
In a flip? The most difficult thing?
This is a very loaded question.
Timeline.
Yeah. For me, it's either budget or timeline.
Yeah.
That's the two biggest stresses for me.
Like scheduling?
Scheduling, yeah, and keeping things on budget.
Keeping it flowing with hiccups.
We just talked about the schedule, how you like to go over all these things. I don't think I really had a chance to ask specifically where you put each one in. So you talked about ordering kitchen cabinets, paint. I just wanted to get a more specific answer, if possible, on when in the flip you put the rest of the parts in. So you get the inspections done, you get the demolition, and then you start installing the electrical stuff. So after you close the walls,
Okay, well,
Walk me through
this is how I do it. Most you can do different ways. Paint and flooring is generally one of the last things to do. Anything that's going to move or needs to be tested, like a window or door, should be put in before the finishing stuff starts to happen, in case there's any type of modifications. Door needs to be trimmed or whatever it may be. The exact sequence, I mean, you have walls go on, they get mudded, which is a compound, they get sanded and prepped for paint. You have your power up finishing electrical going in, so your outlets and your light fixtures and your switches. You are having trim installed, you're having floor being put in, you have your hardware for your doors and your light fixtures and stuff all going in, your grates, your covers for your floors, your HVAC systems. You're testing all your plumbing and electrical installations, making sure that everything is performing the way
These
that it
are
should
in
be.
order you're going?
So the timelines, it's tough to give the exact answer, because a lot of the finishings are up to the availability of a lot of the finishing trades. But obviously you need to use common sense when scheduling. You don't want to do the floor before you do the paint, right? Because if you paint and you drop on the new floor, then you have an issue. You don't want to put your light fixtures up if you haven't finished sanding the walls, because then the dust goes on the light fixtures. These are the little things. At the end, the last 2 weeks, it's all about all the pretty things and the breakable things.
And touch-ups.
And touch-ups, yes. So those are the three things that you're going to expect to see on the last finishing quarter of everything. Oh, your bathroom tile usually goes in right after when you close up. All the finishing electrical starts to come into play. All your windows and doors are going to be installed. Any type of outside structures, like your decks, your awnings, all that stuff can be on the back side of the flip. It's really tough to give a definitive answer, because as long as you do the rough installations, and then that after that comes the finishing, and then the last 2 weeks, so the last quarter is really all your breakables.
I see. So once the house is finished, and I believe this is more where you would play, Natalie, price the house according to the market. So that means that you want to do research, I'm guessing, on what's going on in your local real estate market. How do you go about that, personally?
So I do comparables in that particular neighborhood with a similar home, see what's active, so what's currently on MLS, also what has sold in the past, but recent past, and then we discuss a number and we list it for that number that's agreed upon.
And the number is based, of course, also on
the comparables.
The comparables and the money you've put into the house.
We take that in consideration, but I mean, you can't list too high. So generally it goes off the comparables with what we've put into the home, the look of the home, the quality of the home.
So homes that essentially look newer and such are renovated and are the same size, really the big two things that go into it, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Okay. Now, putting it on the market, I do like to ask first, how long do you find flip homes take to sell versus homes that are not flipped?
It's all different. It just depends if that buyer comes along. I don't think there's a specific timeline. Some could sell in a day and some could sell in 4 weeks. It really just depends if that buyer is there.
Do they sell relatively quickly compared to homes that have not been flipped? Or even homes that are newer or something like that?
I wouldn't say that. It really just depends on the buyer.
I see.
I don't think there's a timeline. Every house is different and every buyer is different.
I see. What's the longest you expect to be holding on to the house?
The longest that we'd like to hold on to the house?
Yeah. I mean, what's the most extreme case you've had, or what's the worst thing you could do? I mean, if it takes a long time to sell. I mean, it seems like it's rare that people don't buy a nice.
I mean, you give
but
yourself some leeway. So you list the home, but you know that there is a possibility we'll have to decrease or lower the price, I should say. The longest we would like it to be on the market is 2 weeks, but
okay.
The market really dictates.
No more than a month.
Yeah.
No more than a month. Okay, so that's really the maximum.
That's what we budget.
That's your max.
So what do you do after? Has that ever happened where it's taken longer than a month to sell a house?
Linwell was a month.
Well,
Right on. Yeah.
Right on. So it hasn't. We did one flip where we thought it would go in a day. It was brand new top to bottom.
LED, everything.
We spent an absorbent amount of money, the most we've ever spent on a flip, and made the house brand new top to bottom. It was a showstopper. I mean, it could have been in a magazine. And I'm not just saying that because it was our project. It was very, very nicely done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost too nice to the point
Yeah.
where people didn't maybe see themselves living in it, or I don't know what it was. But the
That's
house
fun.
sat on the market for a
So
month.
nice.
Yeah.
And really made us rethink a little bit of about our vision and how nice we wanted to make the homes.
So is that something that you now consider when you do a home that, even though you spend a lot of money, doesn't mean that it will always pay dividends
Absolutely.
when you have to sell it?
Right.
It was a very big lesson we learned. Things that are important in our world aren't necessarily important in the average home buyer's world. Taking consideration, for instance, the last flip that we did, we didn't just redo the bathroom. We redid all of the rough plumbing, the service sewer line, and everything. Not just in the fact that maybe in 5 years or 10 years, for instance, the sewer line would break down and the rough plumbing would break down behind the brand new bathroom. So at the end of the day, the customer who purchases that home doesn't notice that the extra $10,000 went into redoing all of the rough plumbing underneath that brand new beautiful bathroom. So we really spent we completely redid the electrical in that home. We had the utilities run new service lines, new boxes. We completely did it, and it was 100% to spec, to code, and the market didn't receive it well. It almost was like
Too much.
it was too much. Yeah.
A lot of the problem was that people want to see the aesthetics and they don't necessarily understand the value of what
quality.
you do and the quality you do. So
Exactly.
do you find that that's more important then when you're doing a house is primarily aesthetics and then...
Well, we'll always do quality. It just, I think we won't go as far as we did.
That's just it, that's probably the toughest thing that we deal with as flippers, as you don't want to do it wrong. You want to do it right. You want to do it quality, but you also don't want to pay for it, right? Because the more you pay for it, the less money you make. So it's tough to manage all that. But at the end of the line, Natalie nailed it right on the head, is the name is what makes us successful. We can flip a home and make an extra $10,000 by doing it incorrectly, easily. But if we wanted to do it and replicate it over and over and over again, to the point where we have customers sourcing us out and asking them to flip their homes because we're doing it that way. We may not make the most amount of money on one project, but if you clear a successful path,
Repeat business.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a long-term investment, instead of in the short run making more money and then, having a tarnished reputation, you make a little less money, but you build a reputation in your community, and then people want to renovate their homes and you can flip more houses. It's,
Yes.
in the long run, it's more successful.
That aspect is extremely tough for for most flippers to grasp, because everybody gets hungry on the one project and wants to maximize. But and that's why flippers don't last very long, and their reputations soon go downhill because they do short out in some aspect.
I see. Anyways, I want to say thank you to Natalie and Sharvin for doing the podcast, the 3-part series. It's been very interesting and informative. For those of you who want to learn how to flip a home, these two are the best you can find. So
Keshavarznia.